All right, this station is called Fluidized Bed Coating. And what we're doing here is we're again utilizing the polyethylene plastic powder. This whole tank is full of polyethylene plastic powder. And I've also mixed in a little bit of pigment. And we're going to make a funnel, okay? Now it's called Fluidized Bed Coating because I'm fluidizing this material. That doesn't mean we're making it wet, okay? Fluid means in motion. So one thing I need to remember to do when I come to this station is to follow this yellow hose all the way down the staircase into the storage room where I have a really large air compressor, and we're going to flip that air compressor on, okay? I want that air compressor to charge up. It's going to take about 2 to 3 minutes. All right, now that our air compressor is charged, I know that I can open up this valve and allow air to come through this powder. Let's take a look at what that looks like when I do that. Do not open that air valve all the way open quickly. You just want to barely crack it. When I barely crack it, you can hear the air come on, and you can see the powder start to roil and bubble. That's exactly what we want. I'm going to shut that off to allow the air compressor to full charge. So in here, the oven, we have our molds. This is an internal mold, and the plastic powder is going to fuse around the exterior of the mold. We're up to 500 degrees. These molds have been here for a couple hours. They're hot, and they're ready to go. So with my gloves on, I'm going to grab that hot aluminum mold. I want to hit it with a little bit of mold release because, again, we want to remove our product from here when we're done. Now I'm going to hang this mold onto this hook, and most importantly, I want to turn on the air before I drop this mold in here. If I don't fluidize this material first, it's pretty solid, and it's going to lift up the mold, and the hook's going to come off of the wire, and the mold's going to fall to the bottom of the tank. So I have this hooked on here, and I want to fluidize this material first. So I'm going to just barely crack that. I can see my plastic is starting to roil and bubble, and I can lower my mold into that fluidized bed. What's happening is that dry plastic powder is a thermoplastic. So when it's heated, it becomes softened and liquefied. And as those powder pieces hit that mold, they melt and stick to it. The longer the mold's in there, the more powder is going to melt and stick to the mold. As the powder heats up, it's going to liquefy and more powder is going to stick to that. After a while, we're going to reach the point of diminishing returns, meaning our mold's going to start to cool off, and it already has. And as the mold cools off, it can no longer penetrate through the thickness of the powder that's built up on it, and I've reached a point where leaving it in the tank isn't going to do any good. I'm going to leave this in there for maybe a minute to a minute and a half. And after that time, I want to be able to lift this up, and really, really importantly, I want to dump the powder out of the top and put it back in the oven. I'm going to repeat this process a couple of times to get a wall thickness I want. All right, it's been about a minute and a half. I'm going to turn off the air, lift up the lid, grab the hook. I'm going to use the pliers this time so I can show the camera removing the powder from the top of this. I got to get all of that out of there as much as I can. A lot of students will leave that in there and it becomes a huge mess later. But what we can see here is I've got this powder. You can see it's even starting to turn translucent right now. That means it's liquefying, it's melting. I want to put this in the oven for a few minutes and watch that really outside of that start to melt good. Let's put this in the oven. I want to put this towards the back of the oven as best I can. Careful not to hit the other molds. And I'm going to close the door. And I'm going to peek in on it in about 2 minutes. If I peek in it sooner than that, it's probably not particle fusion on the outside yet. If I wait too long, it's all going to run right off of my mold and onto the bottom of the oven. So I'm going to wait 2 minutes. I can start to see when my funnel is ready. The dry plastic powder look is gone. The granular look is gone. And I'm starting to see this translucent, shiny polyethylene plastic. Very carefully, I'm going to grab that out of there. And we can see it's ready to be dipped a second time. I want to make sure I dip this 2 to 3 times to get that wall thickness I need for my funnel. So I'm going to repeat this process. Again, I'm going to hook it. Be sure to turn your air on first. I can see my air is boiling. My plastic is boiling. And another minute to minute and a half. It's been a minute and a half. Turn off the air. Repeat the same process I did before. most importantly, dump off all of the excess powder out of the inside of that. I'm going to be glad I did that later. Back to the back of the oven, and we're going to peek on that in about 2 minutes. Looks like I'm ready for my third and final dip. Minute and a half. All right, that should be it for me. The repeated dips is so that I get a chance to build up a wall thickness. Get all of that excess powder off of there. I'm done here. I'll return this to the oven for the last time. Give it a couple of minutes until it's nice and shiny looking. And all of my powder is fused together. It's been about 2 or 3 minutes. We can see that the granular look of the exterior is gone. It looks wet, shiny, and translucent. It is done, and we're ready to cool this off. So I very carefully want to grab that out of there. I'm going to turn it upside down so that gravity doesn't take over and it starts to drip off my mold. I'm going to bring this down to the sink. Hot mold, cold water is fine. I don't have to worry about anything collapsing. And we'll let the cold water run onto that for maybe a minute. I do want to unmold this while the mold is still hot, if I can. Sometimes it's the end of lab, you need to go to class, we'll have to unmold this tomorrow. But what happens is, as this cools off, as the mold cools off, everything kind of grabs a little tighter. It's going to be more difficult to take this off tomorrow than it is while the mold is still warm. All right, unmolding can be a challenge. We're going to do a series of cuts. I'm going to take an X-Acto knife. I'm going to ride that knife along the edge of the mold. Okay, you can see where the knife itself is riding right along the edge of the mold. I can keep contact with the mold the whole time. And notice I'm pushing the blade away from my hand. So if it slips, it goes against the table. Now right there, I've separated the top part of the mold. This will be garbage. Okay, we'll get that out in a minute. The next cut I want to do, I'm going to set this down like this, and you can see there's already a natural break right along here. The mold actually has some embossed areas in it to help me slide the knife on those areas. So I'm going to push the knife down onto the table surface, and instead of moving the knife, I'm going to move the mold. Sliding right along that embossed area of the mold, all the way around to where I started. That area is also garbage. So I will separate that from the mold. That's garbage. Now, getting the mold off here with a twist and a pull can be a little bit of a challenge. There's a vacuum there to break, okay? I did use mold release, and with a twist and a pull, I've removed my plastic from the mold. It's not a funnel yet. I don't have a funnel until I have an opening. So I want to kind of spin my plastic underneath my X-Acto knife. Make sure my edge looks pretty good here, and it does. There's a completed funnel mold. Now, garbage. This is the most challenging part to get this off of here. Students leave these laying around the lab, then we don't have any molds in the oven, then nobody can make a funnel. So I'm going to grab this tin snips, use it as kind of a pry. I can get underneath there, and I can pry that up. And if I need to, I can cut into this up to the stem and be able to remove garbage. This is now ready to go back. And there's our funnel mold. Fluidized bed coating, plastic, dry powder, airborne, fluidized. Sticking to our mold, building up a wall thickness. And our final product here is polyethylene in this case, and it's stress-free. I didn't have to force any plastic to this shape. I didn't take a sheet and force it into this shape. I didn't injection mold this funnel. I have a stress-free product, okay? And I can use this for molding to create a product and reuse the mold over and over again. You'll also see tetrafluoroethylene used. And tetrafluoroethylene is 3M's trade name is Teflon, so non-stick coatings, things that would be on a frying pan or on the surface of an iron for ironing our clothes. That is fluidized bed coating using dry thermoplastic polyethylene powder.